Today we're talking about the principle of design, emphasis. What is emphasis? How does an artist create emphasis? Emphasis is simply a focal point. An artist uses contrast and the elements of art to create contrast, to create a focal point, a place that they want the viewer to look. So we're going to look at some different ways of how to do that, some famous artists who have done that and how they did it, and then we're going to create our own artwork doing just that, creating a focal point. If we look at this picture of umbrellas, what should we be looking at? That's what emphasis is. That's what a focal point is. The truth is, with this one, you really can't tell what the artist wants you to look at because they're all kind of the same. They're all different colors, but they're all kind of the same. However, in this picture, if you look at it, you could see automatically the rainbow umbrella is what you should be looking at because it's so different than everything else around it. So it stands out. Now, if you took the color away, it would become less of a focal point because now everything is in black and white. The color is what creates the emphasis. Color is only one way to create emphasis in an artwork. Let's look at some other ways. Another word for emphasis is focal point. It's the center of interest or activity in a work of art. The very first picture you see here, the focal point is obviously the umbrella that is in color. It's different than all of the other umbrellas. One, it has the person's eye underneath it, but mostly because the color is different than all the others. So here they created a focal point by using the element of art, color. Now in the second one, the center of interest or the focal point is the one white ball off to the right-hand side, and that's because the artist used space. He moved it away from the other white balls, and that created that as the center of interest or the focal point. So he used space and contrast. That dark black behind it creates the focal point. Finally, in the last one, we have arrangement of rocks and with a shell on it, a starfish that is all in shades of blue. It's monochromatic, but the starfish is so much lighter than the others. The value is so much lighter that it creates a center of interest or a focal point. It's also a different shape than everything else, so he used value and shape to create this focal point. All of these elements of art could be used to create focal points. Okay, let's look at this artwork real quickly, done by Jacques Louis David in 1784. First of all, let's look at it and see what do you think the focal point is? What is the center of interest? I think the center of interest would be the swords. And in this story, this is the story of him giving his sons the swords to go into battle against. It was kind of a family against family type of things. The two families had intermarried, so the women in the background are from both families, and they're in mourning. But notice the colors of their robes and their dresses are kind of drab compared to the bright colors of the red in the father and the first son. Those are bright colors that lead you right to their arms, and the arms are pointing directly to the swords. So they're using these implied lines to point to those swords. Also, the swords are so much lighter than that dark background behind them that it makes them stand out. Another thing, the people are looking, the main people are focusing and looking directly at the swords. That's called the line of vision. So the arms pointing towards the sword, the bright colors that lead you to the sword, the color contrast, and the field of vision, the lines of vision, all make the viewer look directly at the focal point of the swords. All right, let's look at this painting by Rene Magritte, 1964. This is a surrealist artwork. The surrealists dealt a lot with dreams. They would paint unreal things and real situations. So if you look at this, what do you see as the focal point? I notice, of course, immediately the apple in front of the man's face. One of the reasons is because it's so strange. Why would an apple be hovering in front of a man's face? So the context is actually used. Also, the color contrast, the placement is right directly in the center. If you notice, the red tie points directly up to the apple, and red and green are complementary colors on the color wheel. Everything else in here is kind of drab, neutral tones, except for the face, the apple, and the tie, which brings you to the focal point. So he uses color and placement as well as the subject matter to create a focal point. And a little known fact, his arm there, on the right hand side to you, your right hand side, is actually backwards, and that's kind of weird too. But again, the surrealists were known for doing strange things. Who knows why he painted it backwards? He's passed on now, so we may never find out. In Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth in 1948, the artist uses space to create the focal point. Notice there is a house and a little farmhouse up on the top. Again, they're done in drab neutral tones so that they don't capture your attention. But all of the primary space here is this open field that Christina is laying in, and he places her down in this corner so that she's close to the viewer. She's far away from that horizon line, and she's larger than everything and close to the viewer. So he uses the placement of space to make Christina the focal point, as well as a slight contrast in the color of her clothes. That pinkish red, the only place it's used in the entire painting, is in her dress. Her arms are kind of the same color as the field, a different value of them. Her shoes and hair would kind of be along the lines of the house in the background. The only thing with any other color is her dress. So he uses the color as well as the placement close to the viewer, all this space of the field around her to create focal point. In Edward Hopper's painting here in 1927, he creates the focal point. And if you look at it, you'll see several things that point you where? Where do you see as the focal point? Give you just a second to look. If you'll notice, the hat and the face are brighter than everything else. Notice how it stands out from that black background of the night window. Also, the lights in the black window that are reflecting, they are kind of pointing you towards her face. The side of the frame of the window comes down and over and towards her, and then the peaches in the base pull you back up to her face. The shape of the hat crowns her face. So when I look at this, I notice her hat and her face as the focal point. So he uses the contrast of the dark and the light, as well as these lines that all point you towards her in the window and the lights. Let's get started. Okay, now that we've learned more about the principle of art, emphasis, and focal points, we're going to make our own artwork now using emphasis to create a focal point. You're going to need paper, pencil, an eraser, a Sharpie, and something to add color, like maybe watercolor paints. I think that's what I'm going to use, or color pencils, crayons, whatever you have on hand. You'll also need a ruler. Okay, so let's get started and have. First thing I did was I drew a horizon line going across the page, and then a little smile there. That's the bottom of my fruit bowl. A couple of lines coming down, and another smile for the bottom, and another one for the very bottom. Then a very light smile at the top, And I'm putting some little round things in there for fruit. Part of a banana that comes out. Over on this side, I'm going to have some grapes, which are just little circles that overlap one another and come down off of the side. Another half a circle for another fruit. And to balance with that one banana on the right hand side, I'm going to put one on the left as well. And then a little pear shape. And again, it's great to have our fruit overlapping one another. And since I have some grapes on that side, I'm going to put some grapes on this side as well. And that's not only because I want the shapes to balance, but I want the colors that I painted to balance as well. Then some more semicircles and another pair, and I'll be finishing off with my fruit basket. Now, after I get all of my fruit drawn, I'm ready to start the floor, and I want to have these lines come in like a little checker. So I imagine a little vanishing point, and I'm going to have all of my lines point to that vanishing point. So you can actually make a little dot there and just hold the end of your ruler on it and then come out to make your lines on your tabletop there. Notice every once in a while I'll double check to make sure my ruler is still touching that vanishing point. And it'll make it look more three-dimensional. After you have all these lines, you're just going to come and make some more horizontal lines and make them get smaller as they get farther away, bigger as they come closer to the edge of your paper. And that will also make it look more three-dimensional. After I have my tabletop done, I'm just going to put some little wavy designs in the background and create some little areas. I want it to be a little different than my tabletop. So I'm just going to fill in the background with some wavy spaces. Then I'm going to come in after I get the large areas and block them off into smaller areas. I'm going to go over everything with the fine tip Sharpie. I drew first with the pencil lightly in case I messed up and I want it to erase. Okay, this is a good time to add some little designs on your bowl. And once you finish tracing everything with your Sharpie, you could erase all of your pencil lines. And then this is when I divided up my background some more into smaller places. And what I'm going to do is add a few more details. And I'm going to add some little dots because I'm working with the Sharpie. I can't very well shade with the pencil. So I'm just making some little dots on my fruit where I want it to be shadowed. So I'm imagining my light is coming from the right-hand side of the page, and that would make my shadows on kind of the left-hand side. So I'm making some little dots to give it a shadowed look on my fruit and my bowl. Now these are little patterns that are Zentangle patterns that I'm going to have attached to your assignment. And I'm looking at the different values. Some are dark, some are light. I'm going to use some of the patterns from the sheet to fill in all these areas in the background. And what I'm wanting to do is make them smaller as they get closer to the fruit basket so that they appear to get farther away and that they're darker. And then I'm going to use the lighter ones farther away from the fruit basket, and I'm going to make them bigger so they'll be lighter. And that way everything will get darker as it gets closer to the fruit basket. The value will get darker and it'll create even more of a focal point on the fruit basket. And when I use one on one side, I'll use it throughout it. I'll move it around. You see the different designs. I'm using it here and there, not side by side, but I'm moving it around. Now I'm going to use this thicker Sharpie to add some cross hatching on the tabletop so that it will look like a checkered tabletop. And as they get farther back, they're going to get smaller together so that it'll look more three-dimensional. And if I wanted perfect straight lines, I should have used a ruler and I could have gotten them a little straighter, but Miss Stacy was kind of in a hurry. Then I'm going to go over my fruit again with this dark Sharpie. Again, I want my fruit basket to stand out as my focal point, so I want to make sure to use that. And I'm going to create some lines. They're those swervy lines that kind of point to the fruit basket. I went ahead and done them in dark as well. So I'm putting some dots in the white spaces so that it'll be lighter, but it won't look like I forgot about it and left it completely empty. And again, my dots got bigger as they got farther out. So now everything just points to my fruit basket, and I used the element of lines to point to it, value, and now I'm adding color to the fruit basket and the fruit so that it will also be one of the elements I use to create that focal point or that emphasis. Now, since I had yellow on one side, I have yellow on the other, and that's why I put the banana on both sides. And since I have the purple grapes on the left side, I have the purple grapes on the right side. I moved the red throughout it. I put some of the purple and the green and the red on the bowl as well so that it's balanced out. But as you see that we created the focal point, or the emphasis is on the basket of fruit. And we did that by using value, darker color, darker patterns towards the center. We use line in those dark lines in the background, as well as the lines in the tablecloth that all point to it. And we use color to create emphasis on the fruit basket. So you could do this project if you don't want to do a fruit basket. You could do an animal or anything you want to do. Just remember to use the elements of art to create a focal point on your subject. I can't wait to see what you do with this. Make sure you share it with